Friday Night Racing.
On Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
Yeah, you're very welcome along this Friday afternoon to Friday Night Racing. As ever, if you want to get involved, you can drop us a tweet at Off the Ball, or indeed, if you're listening to us on the radio this evening on News Talk, you can text the show on 53106. Friday Night Racing is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie, or of course you can always follow the Twitter account at HRI Racing, and the hashtag every racing moment is busy across the week. Mikey Kiely is our guest this week. Mikey, you're very welcome. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. Very good, thank you.
Johnny Ward is here as well. Johnny, how are you?
Getting on, Ger.
Are you prepared for Cheltenham? Are you ready for the onslaught that's coming next week?
Just glad it's on now. You know, it did look fairly dodgy for a while, 50-50 in the betting for a while, and it's a great relief. I was very worried at one stage, and it would be a disaster for... I know coronavirus is a lot more to do with than racing, but it would be a disaster. I don't know if they could reschedule it, and just so much has gone into it financially for Cheltenham, and just all the preparation that's gone in, so I'm very relieved that it seems to be going ahead anyway.
Yeah, all right. Mikey, people probably won't be that familiar with your work. Your, I want to say day job, but day job is with the Limerick hurlers, where you're strength and conditioning. Your PhD is the reason that you're here with us at the moment. You're currently in the middle of your PhD research, are you? Or how close are you to finishing it?
I'll probably get in trouble for that. So my day job is my PhD and my part-time work is with Limerick GA.
Sorry, I should have done that right.
Yeah, but so I suppose essentially it started from a vision Adrian McGoldrick would have had in conjunction with Sarah Jane Cullen and WIT and Giles Warrington in UL. So essentially they've set aside 2 or 3 research projects that they hoped would be done. I applied to do one. It was just something I was kind of slightly interested in. I wouldn't have realised how interested I would have became. So I went for that. We applied for funding with Irish Research Council and HRB, and now in my 4th year, looking forward to completing soon, hopefully.
Okay, so I mean, I know these things obviously don't have a specific set schedule, but 4 years sounds about right?
Yeah, 4 years.
You're nearly done?
Is it? So by the end of the year, funding until December, so by the end of the year I should have completed.
And what's it in?
So we're looking at the physiological demands of racing for jockeys. So essentially, while we had some data on it, we didn't really know what the physiological demands were for specific race distances. So now we have relative heart rates and blood lactates and kind of RPs, which would be a rate of perceived exertion that the jockeys would experience during the race for specific race distances. And from that, essentially, what we want to do is just see, are the jockeys actually prepared to meet the demands they face in racing? So that was another part of the study.
And so, is this exclusively National Hunt? Are you doing National Hunt?
No, we've National Hunt and Flat. So a lot of the testing is actually done at this point. So we were recruited, for the in-race testing, we were recruited 10 of the top flat jockeys and 10 of the top National Hunt jockeys. I don't mean top 1 to 10, but we aim to get as good a quality jockey as we could, so that we knew that when they were riding that there'd be competitive finishes that we could monitor. What we didn't really want is a jockey going out, although we had no control over this, pulling up or obviously if they fell or that, that's inevitable.
Did you turn anybody down? Did you?
Yeah.
Here, look, I think no, sorry.
You're okay. Yeah. But to be fair, I'd no problem get 10 jockeys from either code, and it's only when you get inside the weighing room, they're unbelievable people. It's not every dressing room, and Johnny can probably vouch for that. It's not every dressing room you can go into and you get met with kind of friendly vibes. Whereas with the jockeys, they were unbelievably welcoming into, I suppose, it's a safe haven for them from a lot of pressures, you know.
Were they curious about what you're doing?
Some would be curious, some would not let on they're curious. Although it's friendly, it's competitive in there. And I might be doing, say, a blood lactate, which would involve a pinprick to the ear just to get a blood marker for intensity of riding. And you'd get another jockey kind of looking over out of the corner of the ride that would be interested. And then I'd wait, and then I'd go over to them afterwards when they're on their own and maybe just have a chat, see would they be interested in being tested. So there was definitely interest, but there was also a kind of a front that I maybe don't need that. And it's within, I see it within jockeys, they think that it might be nearly a softness to get help from sports science or that. Now, although it's improving drastically, and professionalism is really, really improving, and Wayne Middleton race would vouch for that the uptake in S&C classes has improved greatly in the last couple of years. But there's definitely was a little bit of uncomfortableness to begin, but they were getting interested and more interested. Some jockeys more than others, the same as every sports person. Some people love the sports science, some people don't, and it's just, I suppose, finding happy medium.
It's good to compare and contrast here. So obviously, it seems like in the GAA a penny dropped years ago, but I'm not 100% sure that when what's the difference, for example, in a GAA dressing room versus what you would see in the weigh room?
Yeah, I suppose I'm fortunate enough to work with a really good and diligent bunch of athletes currently that really soak up information and look for information and drive standards. I suppose the jockey culture, and I'd make kind of comparisons to when rugby probably turned professional. Some were doing kind of resistance training, some were looking after diets, some weren't. And it's the very same in the jockeys. You've got some people that are really, really, I suppose, forthcoming, looking for information. And then you've got some that just will ride out, will go race, will go home. So it's very dependent on the individual, but although jockeys and horse racing and the work of the pathway, it really is paying dividends, and uptake in I suppose, performance practices are improving. It is still behind other sports, yes.
I guess there are people who've been there for so long and have been so successful that there is a ain't broke, don't fix it mentality, and then there are others who are like, I need every little inch that I can get, and it's always the ones who need every little inch that are going to be the ones who are most open to change.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of jockeys would say to me, like, I just need to ride out. That's how I get fit. That's how I get fit enough for horse racing. But a study I did with Sarah Jane Cullen, we actually showed that the riding gaits of walk, trot and canter, which the jockeys do in a riding yard predominantly, do not get anywhere near the demands of racing. So we've jockeys that are riding out every morning, but then they're going racing, and we'll have Cheltenham next week where, say, Rachel Blackmore could have 3 rides in a day, and the intensity she's going to meet in them 3 rides is much higher than riding out. So if she hasn't exposed herself to that intensity, which she will have because she is that person that looks for every inch, she won't meet the demands on the race day. She'll be tired going from race 2 to race 3. So riding out just isn't enough for jockeys, essentially, yeah.
What percentage of jockeys are doing extracurricular stuff then, like gym work and S&C and so on? So
we've another survey I did with 85 professional jockeys in Ireland showed us that 42% are kind of taking part in strength and conditioning. However, half of that is just cardio, which is probably more weight orientated than performance orientated. So while it is increasing, we still have it's still a small proportion of the jockeys are participating in strength and conditioning, and it's not just for racing. Like their bone health, because they're non-weight bearing, riding out most days and riding, they're probably at a greater risk for osteopenia, osteoporosis in later life. So it's to build up their bone health and also to become more resilient and robust when they fall. So like our jump jockeys are falling 1 in every 10 races. 1 in every 20 races, and 1 in every 10 of them is a serious injury, a break, or something probably more. So it's all encompassing. It's not just getting stronger for riding or just improving performance. There's multifactorial benefits from S&C for jockeys.
It's interesting. I was speaking to Johnny Murtagh the night before that roadshow, and he was just saying that if he only knew then what he knows now in terms of all of this stuff, he reckons like it would have been massively beneficial. And he was riding top of the world, but weight was a struggle, I suppose, for him. And in terms of he had a set routine of at the start of I think February into the end of March, he would just basically have a routine of hardly eating at all, and just that was the way he dealt it. But I don't think there was enough knowledge at the time. No,
there definitely wasn't. But to be fair with the pathway that's there now, the knowledge is there. You've Wayne Middleton doing the S&C. We've nutrition support, physio support, psych support. So it is there, and it's free to jockeys through the care system. So all that is there. It's just a matter of, I suppose, getting it there, getting it out there. The other thing, I kind of think that we ask a lot of jockeys in terms of their time. I ask them for testing time. They don't have time. So for jockeys, on average of the 85 jockeys surveyed, they were working 32 hours a week. They're probably, even though I didn't measure this, they're probably driving between race courses and riding out another 20 hours. They're not getting the calories in that they need to sustain the work they're doing, and then they go to work. Then they go racing. So jockeys have a week or 2 weeks work done before they get racing each week. So like their time is unbelievably valuable. So it's how what can we do to make sure that they can give time to the performance or the sports performance side of it. At the minute, a lot of them don't have time, to be fair to them, do you know?
Yeah, they actually don't have time not to do it.
Yeah.
That's so there's a trap there because so it seems you know, we've had countless jockeys in who've talked about how they live their lives hungry and they're subsisting on a diet of jellies and fizzy drinks, and it always struck me as being the wrong way about going to reach the level of peak performance that you need to be at for those final few furlongs.
Yeah.
If you have the fumes of Red Bull driving you at that point, how successful are you going to be? There must be some way of building back and going, what's my ideal weight? How am I going to reach that with healthy calories? Should I go vegan for a while? Like, there must be alternative ways to do this.
Yeah, and Gillian O'Loughlin, our resident nutrition with the pathway, could definitely shed more light on it, and she has done this show in the past. But definitely we need to get to a place where jockeys are maintaining weight rather than making weight, so that we can get consistent in their calories in and calories out, or their energy expenditure out. So essentially we want them to know how much energy they're spending a day and have the calories to match that, rather than starving for a day, going to racing and stopping at Supermax, McDonald's on the way home, which is very, very popular. Now it's interesting, even in the couple of years that I've been doing this study, I've seen particularly a lot of the flat jockeys bringing lunch boxes to the weighing room where they can be sure that they have what they need to make weight, and really healthy options, nuts, seeds, fruits, etc. Now the other side of that is, before the actual race course, I suppose canteens or tuck shops, which is in place in a lot of areas, they weren't meeting the nutritional values that we would have hoped that the jockeys could use. But that is improving fast now. A lot of race courses are buying in and trying to meet. There's actually a system in place where they're trying to meet certain standards of care for jockeys from a nutritional perspective.
The other thing that comes across when we talk to them a lot of the time is that muscle weighs more than I don't know, whatever the alternative is, but actually, like, so I can't do strength and conditioning, I can't do weights, I'm going to put on weight.
Yeah, you can put on weight from resistance training. I essentially trying to do it in my other job with the Limerick hurlers. We're constantly trying to put on, not constantly, but with certain players, you're trying to put on lean mass on players, and resistance training can do that. But from the work Wayne Middleton will be doing in race, it's essentially strength training and conditioning. So he'll do a low reps strength exercise that won't put weight on the jockey. It'll make him stronger.
So what kind of stuff?
So like I suppose your heavy multi-joint exercises, so your deadlifts, your squats, which would be very relative to jockeys, but low reps, low sets, and it's incrementally making them stronger over time. You're not looking for any mass changes.
So is this explosive weightlifting?
What Wayne would do is he looks at a race, he'd assess it, and based on some of the data I'd provide him, he'll try mimic the race. So essentially he'll have them in an isometric squat, which would be a contraction without moving, so to replicate the same position they'll hold when they're riding on the stirrups. And then they'll go into a maximal kind of concentric eccentric action, such as mid-ball slam, or maybe pushing out with a resistance band. So we try to mimic the race where possible. And when you do that, you're helping educate the jockey as to why he can build familiarity with the exercise and see, I can see why this is important now.
This is the Karate Kid wax on, wax off. And after a while they're like,
I see why that's important now. So the work Wayne is doing in race is invaluable. It's open to all the jockeys. I just wish more would get in there, because to be fair to Wayne, he doesn't impose himself at all on the jockeys. If they're tired when they come in, they'll do some mobility, but he's always educating. And from the jockeys that are currently in there, which is there is a lot, they're really getting benefit, and he's getting good feedback from them. So we hope it just keeps going.
So let's go back then to you started out by saying we were checking what the physiological demands were on each race, depending on the distances they were in. Is there a significant difference? Is like
in certain metrics there was. So heart rate, their peak heart rate, so the highest heart rate that's attained during a race is actually very similar throughout all races, flat and jump for various distances. And when we say peak, I mean max heart rate. So the jockeys are experiencing heart rates of between 190 and 195 beats per minute at peak.
We normal human beings were at rest are about 60 to 80.
Yeah. So they're working a lot harder than they would perceive, than the public would perceive. But then their average heart rate throughout the race is also higher than what we'd see in other sports. And that's mainly due to the position that they hold, that it's called, a scientific term for it is a quasi-isometric effect. When you're bracing but not moving, it elevates the heart rate.
Squat almost.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Because your body thinks you're about to get in a fight.
Possibly, but
well, you know, when you're squatting, if you squat, like, you suddenly realise, and the longer you're holding it, like, this is actually getting very tough.
Yeah.
You feel your heart, like, so.
You can, like, if anyone at home was to balance on a 10 strip of metal in a semi-squat position for 4 minutes, you probably couldn't do it, to be honest.
You'd die.
So
the
heart rate elevates. What we did find was that the jockeys perceived the longer races to be more difficult. Now, there's no physiological data behind that other than we think possibly duration. So the longer they're in they're bracing or holding, the longer they're pushing out, they perceive that to be more difficult, which is probably common sense.
But the body doesn't actually show any significance.
No, so longer race distances are shown similar blood lactate, which is, I suppose, an intensity metric we'd use from the blood. The heart rate is the same, and even though it's not related to race performance per se, or it didn't impact the results, their hydration among flat and jump jockeys, which is surprising, was actually their hydration levels before the race were reported as the same also. When I say the same, I mean there was no significant difference statistically. There was minor little differences here and there, but the statistics didn't show any major differences. So essentially all races are requiring maximum effort, and the fact that the jockeys are doing this multiple times per day, multiple days per week with no off season, we have to be doing more outside racing if we're going to sustain high performance across a multitude of events in a week.
And can you compare this sport with other sports, like in terms of what that 4.5 minutes might be like?
You can, I suppose, from our perspective in the J world, their lactate and heart rates would be similar to if you were or in a rugby. If you were in a ruck that was quite in hurling or Gaelic football, or if the ball is on the ground, there's 3 or 4 lads fighting for 30, 40 seconds, and you come out absolutely bloating. Your legs are heavy, your hands are heavy. Lactate is obviously high in the body. It'd be something similar to that. So, although jockeys are unbelievably conditioned to it because they're racing so often, we want to make sure that the jockey has the same level of performance for every race. And I'm actually surprised some trainers haven't got onto this. Like, how do they know, our owners, that if they have the jockey in race 4, how do they know they're given the same level of performance they have in race 1? And I'm not sure why, given there's so much money put into the horse, why is there not an S&C coach for every yard, making sure their jockeys are fit enough to give the same effort over 4 races?
It's never been discussed.
Yeah.
And even maybe having 2 jockeys, one to do your first 2 races and one race on, one race off, one race on.
You
one
actually
race
could
off.
do that. You could spread the load a bit, like squad rotation and that. Like, cause, it's very interesting, I'd say. I mean, they'll be going over to Cheltenham there, might have 6 rides in a day.
Yeah, like
at the top level.
Yeah.
You know, and the top jockeys, it's like we don't think about that enough. Genuinely, yeah.
So I heard Puppy saying that on an interview recently that he has 17 rides this year, or hopes to have 17 rides. So it's quite a load. The jockeys, to be honest, they don't think they feel it. And although it's not quantified yet, there is no way you don't fatigue during the...
Of course.
Physiology would dictate that you will fatigue during the day.
You couldn't play 2 football games in a day and not be the same, you know?
No, and the load's not the same per se, but it's... Certainly, we would see a fatiguing effect.
It's a peak, and another peak, and another peak. And
it's a peak with no recovery,
And often, like, an inadequate diet in the middle of it as well. Like.
That's it. So if they're making weight for a handicap at the end of the day, that means they're making weight all day. Do you know? So it's a poison chalice in a way, do you know?
And so are there conclusions that, like, apart from do some more fitness work and manage your fitness work so that it apes what the conditions you're going to see in a race is?
Yeah, our main conclusion would be essentially the riding out is not meeting the demands of racing. So if jockeys want to optimally prepare for racing, we must do kind of more hit work or high intensity interval training. That could come through running or bike work or rowing machine. It can come through many forms, or we can get specific. We can get specific on it, I suppose. Like the work I suppose Wayne is doing with the squat and the maximal concentric and eccentric efforts afterwards. But we certainly need to be doing more.
That's interesting. I didn't.
Yeah.
So you can do some of this through rowing and.
Yeah, you could. Like what you're trying to do is essentially match or exceed the heart rates and the blood lactate concentration they're experiencing in racing.
And are you trying to do it over the same amount of time? So like.
We would, yeah.
Right.
So we'd often
series of sprints.
You'd probably exceed it. Now in most sports we periodise that, so we'll exceed it for a certain length and we'll taper, come back. But to be honest, anything for jockeys now is a help. So anything they do more will benefit them. But certainly, yeah, we try to match the time or exceed the time and the intensity to what they're experiencing.
So the aerobic work, you could actually fix that. When you were saying earlier on, 40% of them are actually only doing aerobic work, which is around weight. If they were just to do some sprints in the middle of that, that would be an improvement on the long distance.
100%. Like Sean might mention this now, but I remember when I started data collection in December 2018. Sean Flanagan had just returned from an injury in Mallow, and I was testing him.
Returns tomorrow from injury as well.
Yeah, he got I was actually talking to him yesterday, and he got the wires out, so he's delighted. But he was returning. I think it was a lower limb injury. I can't remember the horse's name. Something Molly. He's a Molly below Mallow and won. But he'd just come back from injury, and the race previous he'd just won by a head, and then this was the second race in a row, and he won by a head. And he came into the weighing room and he was shattered. And he knew he needs to get back fitter. So he asked me, was there anything? I gave him some running work that he could do that would enable him to get back, I suppose, a little bit quicker than just riding out. But although they're extremely fit when they're riding, they do lose it very quick. And I suppose a lot of it's feel. But that physical exertion that they're meeting in racing, they don't get in the yard. So if they just go back in racing after an injury, they suffer. And like I remember Sean goes, I put his blood into the machine, and he said, be careful there, you break it. Because he was feeling that tired, that exhausted. Now he rode fantastically the same day. He won two winners by a head, which jockeys always love having, because they're touch and go a lot of the time. So them little things like that aerobic and anaerobic work outside of racing will help them usually.
It does feel like this is a part of the industry that is still quite ripe for disruption, that it still needs an Arsene Wenger to come in and go, why are we doing all this, lads? So, there's still a little bit of room for revolution, and you can see by putting money into funding that clearly the people who are in charge of jockeys' wellness have been thinking about this deeply for a long period of time. Yeah,
and I suppose a lot of it will go back to Adrian McGoldrick and other people in the IHRB and Irish horse racing and so on, but we definitely need to put provisions in place to allow jockeys avail of the strength and conditioning practices. Although weighing and race and everything that's going on in the pathway is excellent, it's nearly all based in Kildare, whereas we've jockeys all around the country. And could we get funding to put little hubs in place? And it's basic, like psychology support, nutrition support. These are basics now in amateur sports. These are professional. This is our richest sporting industry in the country, and we're not really looking after our jockeys enough, I feel.
Okay, so there's room for...
100% there's room for improvement. Now, the provisions that have been put in place in the last year and a half are fantastic, and they're really improving things, but we can go another 20 and 30% most definitely.
I always find it interesting that the jockeys, knowing that this is going to help them make more money, haven't embraced this a bit more just yet.
Yeah, like racing is definitely still very much in the dark ages, I think, in terms of a lot of stuff about the well-being of the jockeys, and you still see jockeys smoking outside the weighing room, and they know it's not good for them, I suppose, but they probably think of it as a weight, as an appetite suppression or whatever. And you never hear a punter saying, God, yeah, I wouldn't be mad on lumping on that favourite because the jockey's having 5 rides tomorrow on heavy ground. Like,
Zinedine Zidane was a fairly heavy smoker for most of his career. Didn't do him that much damage.
So was Fabian Barthez.
Fabian Barthez and him, the two of them used to be outside. Yeah.
No, smoking is bad for you.
Wayne Rooney, on the other hand.
But, I would say, and in fairness to Adrian McGoldrick, I think he's been the pioneer of so much good work. Ironically, I suppose in the later stages while he was in the job himself, but because racing is so, it's quite backward in ways. I think people are slow to take on new things, and maybe they need to almost be seen to know and to have proof that it works. But I think over time it'll be a bit of a no-brainer. Is
it the next generation of jockeys then? So obviously that golden generation of jockeys are kind of coming to retirements now. McCoy went, Ruby's gone. There's a few more who still have to go. But that next generation who are going to be like, I need to catch up to those who are going to embrace this, do you think?
Yeah, and you see the younger jockeys in the gym doing their work for Wayne Middleton and all that, and you know that it is going to take on, that it's just going to become a thing. The gym has become such an indispensable part of the life of the footballer, the hurler, the rugby player now, that it'll naturally extend to racing. I think the point you made there earlier is very valid, but they would associate the gym with muscle and putting on weight, and many jockeys' main issue is weight.
Sorry, you made a good point about that. Like, you're trying to put weight on certain players. Are you not like pumping them full of protein and whey shakes and getting them to, like, is their diet not a bit crazy?
Not really. Like, we'd be very much natural first, so we try to educate around the importance of, like, we'd look at protein, so we'd try to increase the protein per kilogram. Essentially.
Is that like having 3 chicken breasts for dinner though?
Yeah. So for some players, it would be so like if you have a 100 kg player. And you're trying to get in 2 grams per kg, that's a lot of chicken in the day, or 2.2 grams per kg. So essentially, with some players, their energy expenditure would be so high during a day, especially if they had a manual job on top of something like labouring, on top of coming training in the evening, they would have to eat more. And sometimes if they can't meet the minimum kind of requirements through diet, we will give them a shake. But where possible, food first is key for us.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. But like, you'd be having that conversation with the jockey going, no, don't worry, I'm not going to inject you with chicken breasts. Like, don't worry. You might actually be able to have more food.
That's true. I think that's what Johnny Murtagh was alluding to, because he would just effectively diet something that he probably came up with himself as well. Like, I still remember Donnacha O'Brien, who inevitably isn't riding anymore, when he was in here maybe a year ago, roughly a year ago.
I'd say now, yeah.
And it was obviously a 3 o'clock show, but he hadn't eaten since breakfast the previous morning, and that was a small breakfast. And you're not even factoring in then how many rides does he have in a day. And he did reference this, the fact that the first ride is kind of okay, but then you'll have a lull, and obviously your body needs to recover from the exertions of the ride, but it doesn't, and you can't really top up, and you're not as dehydrated. But then you go into maybe race 4, so you've had a gap of an hour and a half, and you've wasted another hour and a half, you've expended energy. And how can you expect, this is the thing that I find so daft about it, like the S&C and the psychology of amateurs in Gaelic games now is the money that's spent on this, yet jockeys, the best jockeys in the world, namely our Irish jockeys, they will go out there starved. And how can you produce optimum performance, notwithstanding S&C considerations?
Yeah, it most definitely. And I suppose, while I'm not from a horse racing background, but culture is so important, and tradition, even more so. So we tend to do what the previous jockeys have done. So, like, I'm sure some of the younger jockeys that are in there now, or probably the top jockeys now, would have looked up to Ruby, see what he was doing. But now, I think we will see change, because you've Paddy Mullins, Rachel, Danny Mullins, you've all these people now buying into the S&C, the nutrition, and I think the younger jockeys coming through will see that.
And some of them you tested, right?
Yeah. And in addition to that is kind of another byproduct of this research is we're creating a testing protocol for jockeys and for the industry. So all new licensed jockeys from... It'll be in pretty soon. We're just trying to validate the actual protocol, but all jockeys that want to get a license will have to do this fitness test. So then we'll have baseline measures of physical performance for all new newly licensed jockeys.
That's a great initiative, yeah.
So there's two benefits to it. Number one, it gets them into weighing. They know where a race is. That's one of the benefits. And the second one is, if they ever fall or are injured, we have baseline measures that we know they can be at before they return to riding. Now, it probably won't be brought in that they can't return to riding, but at least we can advise them that you're a bit off where you were, stay going, go back riding a bit later, do you know?
Yeah, and even the point you made earlier on about tailoring some aerobic work to help somebody reach the confidence levels that they're fit and ready to go again.
Yeah.
That's the type of thing that's going to be very powerful.
Huge, yeah.
Okay, a reminder, Friday Night Racing is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. We're back to looking for some tips from Johnny. It's going to find the script here this week. Just want to read this. I don't write
What did
this.
we go for last week?
I don't write this.
Probably called off, is it?
It wasn't. Certainly this is what it says here. The Tote Irish Injured Jockeys Charity Fund remains at €630 after Johnny's well handicapped, in inverted commas, Favori Logique finished stone last at Leopardstown last weekend.
Spoke to Katie Walsh about this horse during the week, and she basically just thinks that the run the last day on 2 mile, a bit like the jockey, the previous race took it out 2.5 miles in heavy ground. He finished legless, but a horse that I'm definitely going to be following throughout the year.
Do you never learn?
No, sorry, if you go back to his run in Navan, it's only like his 4th or 5th run.
Right.
It's just, he went off about 33-1, so it wasn't...
Right.
No, this horse has plenty of ability. Like, I wouldn't know we would be giving up on him at all.
Are you not putting a line through it and going, right, fool me once, shame on me?
Yeah, but he's only fooled me once, so the second time, next day he runs, he'll be a huge price, and I'm convinced this horse has plenty of ability. Ross O'Sullivan trains him for Cillian McCarthy, who would be Jennifer's husband, so it's a real family thing. They're married to sisters, obviously. Ross and Cillian are married to the Walsh sisters, and I know that they're going to have a good day with this horse.
Okay,
all going well,
so you're going to be on the right side of it no matter what happens.
Yeah, I wouldn't. So if I back a horse and it runs badly, the only consolation I'll take is I didn't lose as much as maybe I could have lost in the horse, and I'm very much convinced that the next day he's going to be a huge price, and I'll go in again. You don't need much to go in your favour at big prices. You know,
Okay.
Effectively, it's kind of like a game of. In the days of war, it's like the guy who's like, he only needs to get it right once, whereas the army are always on guard, and that's kind of
the IRA to Margaret Thatcher.
It's like that, yeah, without trying to condone militant republicanism or anything like that.
Okay, can I just remind you that this is for the Tote Irish Injured Jockeys Fund as opposed to for yourself? Could we pick some winners? Is that like...
Oh no, but I'm usually backing these as well. So
I know, that's the thing. Can we have like a twin track approach here where we try and win some money for the injured jockeys? And
yeah, well, see, I'd always go for, like, I had a charity bet last night at Cheltenham, and I went for 100 to 1 shot. See, if that wins, that's 10 grand for the charity.
It is.
If you put it on 100, if you put on even money shots, it's 100 quid for the charity. It's like, well, that would make an awful lot of difference. 10 grand could, buy a lot of whatever.
Yeah, okay.
My tip is bread and butter at Gorn. I just have to get this up for Gavin Cromwell, who...
Let me go. Okay, with eyes now firmly fixed on next week's Cheltenham Festival, it's the calm before the storm this weekend, where the home action comes from Gorham Park and Naas. On the international front, Super Saturday at Maidan, which is going to be staged behind closed doors, but features 6 group races. Now, bread and butter in the 325 at Gorham Park on Saturday.
Yeah, he's only a 5-year-old for Gavin Cromwell, who obviously has some nice runners next week. He's getting there. He wasn't beaten all that far the last 8 punches down. Just a trainer I've so much regard for. He has a horse, Alpha Mix, going over to Cheltenham, that was bought by JP McManus during the week. It's another boost for the yard, and that's the 325 at Gorn, and the ground is going to be pretty testing, obviously.
Okay, what do you like about bread and butter?
It's a poor race. It's only his 3rd handicap. First handicap he'd excuses. The last day he ran much better, travelled pretty well, and running off 93. This is the type of horse that Gavin Cromwell will do well with. My main fancy for the weekend on Sunday hasn't been declared at Naas, so I just have to wait. We were talking to young Brooder there, was it 2 weeks ago, who rode the winners. So that horse we're on about, Traces in Escorty, that runs Saturday week in Navan, which literally, like, I'm going to be tipping that up anyway for sure. I can't see how it's going to be beaten. Now it's a long way out, but...
Okay, anything else from the weekend?
Yeah, interesting first race tomorrow at Naas. A horse that Sean Flanagan has ridden before, not the first race, rather the 240. He's a horse that, if I can find the race, sorry, I'm in Gorn. Sean Flanagan has ridden this horse a couple of times. It's a weak race. A horse by the name of Future Proof. I'm taking him on with Bumalco, who Robert Tyner and Philip Enright in great form. I don't know, Philip might have a couple of rides next week. That's the first race at Gorn. I think that horse is very interesting. He was second in a point-to-point on his only start.
Okay. Anything else about Cheltenham this far out? Is there any kind of...
Well, the Invoyalin thing is, I suppose, the main aspect of the last couple of days. We were at a preview night last week where Gordon Elliott said that it's not certain that he'll run in the Ballymore, but the market didn't react to that. But he said it again last night that if the ground... There's supposed to be a lot of rain on Sunday, I think. So if the ground gets really testing, that he might run in the Supreme. But they're kind of... they're in a tricky situation here because they have to declare him on Sunday for the Supreme. Now they're going to have to declare him before they know the full considerations of the rain that fell on the Sunday, but they can't declare him a second time in the week. There's a new rule in Cheltenham that you can only run in one race.
Oh, right.
So they're in it's kind of a welfare thing, but it's also to do with kind of basically pricking around with plans. So there's kind of a definite... I don't really have an issue with it, but it means that they have to make their call on Tuesday for whatever race they're running in.
Haven't there been horses who have famously won the second time, having not performed the first time? Am I not?
Probably, yeah. Like at Cheltenham, it's very rare. I know horses do it in Galway, but off the top of my head now, I'm struggling a bit.
Okay.
I'm sure horses have run there, but like it's a bit of a safety. Like if Envoyalin ran in the Supreme and he fell at the first, that's no real hindrance from running on the Wednesday. And you often see that a trainer, if he'll put in a horse in case, like if he falls at the first or he's carried out, I mean, he's fine. He can run again. But obviously this is the new rule. But I still think they're going to go for the Ballymore, which is on the Wednesday. But they have to make a call on and the market seems to be a little bit mixed about which, because everyone, like the amount of people that would have backed him for the Ballymore, like banker, and a late change of route wouldn't be good. It'd be good for the bookies, wouldn't be good for punters.
And you expect Allen to win whatever races?
I do, yeah. I actually don't think it makes any odds what race really he runs in of the two. I think he'll win both. I think he'd actually win both. If he turned up in both, he'd win both.
Okay.
He's an incredible horse.
Mikey, before I let you go, any mega trends in strength and conditioning in GAA that you've seen over the last couple of years that you think the rest of the country hasn't quite become aware of or understood just yet?
Not really. I think, to be fair to Gaelic Games, coaches, backroom teams, they run an unbelievably professional ship for an amateur sport. I'd liken it to any professional sport around the world. I think we're right up there. And I'm not just speaking about my own case, I'm speaking about everyone. There's nothing, I don't think there's anything new. I think we've progressively got more professional. I think we're probably even more professional in some soccer clubs now. Like I hear wild stories where soccer clubs will have players have in their contracts that they won't do strength and conditioning within the club, and
like Premier League.
Oh, Premier League, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah,
because the League of Ireland has really taken it on
so
board.
Then they'll do it on their own.
Some will do it on their own, some won't do it at all. Whether true or not, I don't know. It could be just a wild rumour, but like he said it in a documentary. Jamie Vardy said it himself that he will not do weights. He thinks it will make him slower. So it's not just jockeys. We kind of have sometimes.
Yeah. What's your attitude to that now? For Jamie Vardy's game is based on pace and being in pitch around the box and so on.
I would tell him, look at the size of the 100-metre sprinters in the Olympics.
They're all doing weights.
Yeah.
This does interest me now. So if you look at some, particularly Dundalk, when Dundalk and Stephen Kenny, they started really putting a lot in the strength and condition. And then I do wonder, can they go too far? Where
you were talking about this a couple of Saturdays ago, but
you can definitely become muscle bound. You could reduce your agility, which you could take as pace in a multi-directional aspect. However, these clubs are going to hire good professionals. They're going to know what they're doing. So, and it's not just about speed. It's about, or not just about performance. You're looking at injury prevention as well. It's particularly in League of Ireland now. Like they have to tolerate fairly high loads on a regular basis, and particularly in some of the busy spells, they can have 2 and 3 games a week. Yeah. So to be able to withstand that, it just makes sense from a resistance training perspective that your muscles can tolerate high loads. You know.
It's I do find that fast because I think Who would you credit it to initially in GAA? Would it be like Armagh footballers? Or
Armagh went too far, right?
But they were the kickstart, weren't they?
You've got a few, like, I suppose, when even doing my undergrad below in Tralee, I did the likes of Pat Flanagan lecture me, who'd have been a Kerry at the time, and Pat would have been seen as a driving force in SNC, and he would be coming from an athletics background, but SNC in GAA, I think elements of it have always been there. But the likes of Pat, and I probably don't know, there's probably other fellas in other counties that were as influencing as the likes of Pat Flanagan, but like, SNC is not a new concept among sport. Like, Eastern Bloc countries had strength and conditioning programs going for 60s, 70s, and we're still using the same exercise they were using. I think the difference now is people kind of accept it, and the other side of that is SNC coaches are using technology now, and there's fancy bells and whistles, and but essentially the SNC is always, the foundation of it has been there a long time.
Well, what I was interested in reading about you, Mikey, was that you're a coach as well as strength and conditioning, and so often in the past it has seemed that these two things have been almost in competition in certain instances where the strength and conditioning guys are like, no, we're going to do all this, and then the coaches would be like, well, but actually by integrating the two things together, that's what all sports need to be. Yeah,
I suppose with Limerick 21s, I did the coaching and the SNC, and we were very lucky to have a very talented team that came through at that time, and came through over the last few years. Paul Kinnerk would head up our coaching now with Limerick, who's probably one of the top coaches in Ireland. And my role is kind of solely SNC now, but what I meant from your background and having that thought process. I think something we don't do well as SNC coaches at times is step aside. I think boundaries is the wrong word, but in terms of intensities, durations, give them to the hurling coach. Let him come up with his own games to meet them demands at certain times. But we don't need to have S&C blocks. Sometimes we kind of try to validate ourselves or our own importance. Hurling is hurling, soccer is soccer. You need to spend 90% of your time at that. You know, it's not about S&C.
And the principle is almost exactly the same as what we started the conversation with. You're trying to get people to mimic the 4 minutes of a race with that level of intensity. You're trying to get them to mimic as much of the match conditions as you possibly can, because otherwise there's no point in training.
Essentially, it's always all the same. You're trying to just exceed what you're meeting in the competition. It's the same across every sport, so that when the competition arises, you're comfortable in that space.
As somebody who didn't come from a racing background but has now spent 4 years immersed in it, have you ended up getting bitten by the bug?
I love it. I also had an interest in watching it, but now I've absolutely neglected my homework for Cheltenham next week. I've just been too busy. Last year I had spreadsheets and everything going. But I love it, and the fact that I got to know the people within racing, Johnny probably be able to say a bit more about it, but they're really good, sound people.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, yeah, they are. They're very humble and they're very welcoming into the fold. And great people. I have to say, like I often speak about that, about how, you know, how lucky I am as a journalist that I deal with Irish racing people, because they're all, like, from Aidan O'Brien to Willie Mullins, they're all very approachable. It's incredible. They're the best in the world.
Yeah.
Our guest this week is Mikey Kiely. Thanks very much, Mikey.
Thanks for having me.
And when will you publish your findings? Not to put the pressure on the PhD student. When are you publishing?
I have some published. There's that physiological demands paper is due out in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and hopefully it'll be one more than around September time.
All right, best of luck with that. We'll keep an eye out for those.
All right, thank you.
Friday Night Racing on Off the Ball is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. If you're listening to us on the radio, stay tuned. Loads more coming your way. And if you're watching us on all of our social channels this Friday afternoon, then make sure you bookmark this, and we'll see you next Friday at the same time. youtube.com/offtheball. The best place, of course, is on offtheball.com. Cheers.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.